The Consulting Success podcast is powered by the Clarity Coaching Program. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to find out more and apply.
Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm here with Sara Wilson. Sara, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael.
All right, so Sara, I'm excited for this. You worked in a lot of managerial positions, places like Huffington Post, Facebook. You're now the founder of SW Projects, where you've worked with clients, very well-known brands like National Geographic, the New York Times, and WeWork. You're an expert in digital content strategy, helping brands to tell their stories and really to build communities. And what I found interesting is what your title, kind of former title in the corporate role, was Strategic Partnership Manager, which to many sounds like a really sweet, cool gig. So what was it that made you, want to leave that behind and start your own consulting business?
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you for that lovely intro. It was a sweet gig. I would never, ever represent it as anything less than a pretty damn sweet gig. I was there for almost 5 years. I joined when there was no partnerships team. So I was one of the original hires. And really what that meant at the time was one of the first points of contact for anybody trying to get in touch with Facebook, if you're a public figure or a publisher. So previously it had been like working a friend contact and hoping against hope that you would get somebody to help you take down an imposter Facebook page. Now they were creating this team and I was hired to run lifestyle partnerships. So what that meant really was I could make it up because they really didn't know. And so it was an amazing opportunity to kind of say, okay, here's what I think that means. Yes, lifestyle typically means food, fashion, home, health, travel, all those categories. But it's like, where did I see the biggest opportunity? And for about a year and a half, I worked almost exclusively on Instagram and fashion because I saw this insane kind of moment happening in the fashion industry where this platform, Instagram, which had just sort of recently been bought by Facebook, was organically kind of disrupting an entire industry. And that's what was really exciting to me. So I was able to kind of guide that and be like, okay, I think we can make Instagram the top social platform for fashion. And I think here's like my strategy for doing that. And then went and going and executing on that. So that was a year and a half. And then I switched over and worked on things like food, just as the rise of food video came. You remember that moment when the entire Facebook newsfeed was dominated by shot top-down food videos. That was working with the BuzzFeed Foods of the world and Tastemade. So it was a heady time. And it was also a time where everybody was really excited by this new technology and maybe didn't know how to use it, wasn't as sophisticated. And so it was an awesome education opportunity for me because I love to teach and I also love to learn from the partners. So don't get me wrong, it was super sweet also working for Facebook. All the stuff that you hear is true, the free food, the free this and that. So it was amazing, but like all good things, it had to come to an end. And for me, that was sort of a reckoning because I was like, this is amazing. Why would I leave? And for me, that was about, I saw a shift in two ways. The first was that brands were coming up, leading conversations that publishers really used to be the exclusive arbiters or really the leaders of. So I used to work in publishing. I used to work in magazines. And now brands like Bumble or Casper, or for a time WeWork, were leading these conversations about entrepreneurship or sleep or what it means to be a woman. And that sort of whole narrative was shifting on their shoulders. And yet there was no one, or at least no one that I saw, to help them navigate it. That wasn't part of my kind of wheelhouse at Facebook. I wasn't working with brands really. So it was a cool opportunity that I saw. And I was like, wait, I think I'm really well positioned to do this. The other thing is that, at Facebook, I had been there so long that I had been there longer than, I think at a certain point, 89% of the entire company. We had these little counters on our profiles that said how long you had been there next to everyone else. And I thought, my gosh, if I've been here that means that I have more experience than 89% or even more of the company. That just doesn't feel like a place that I can really learn. Like, who am I learning from? And what is the culture? So I just think that's very typical in that growth type of company, but it just wasn't for me. As the company got larger, I'm a much stronger in a smaller environment. And that's why I decided to leave, those two reasons.
And so, Sara, when you made that decision, what was the first thing that you did to build your consulting business? Like, where did your first client come from?
Yeah. So I actually had the good fortune to consult for about a year from within Facebook with permission of the company. So I had an amazing boss. She basically gave her blessing and said, sure, as long as it's not interfering with your day-to-day work. Then I had to go get permission from Facebook, sort of corporate, and they were like, yes. And so I had a bunch of clients where I was able to, in a very like low stakes way, figure out how to price, how to work with them, what were my offerings, what do they need? And really all those things that a lot of people work out in their first year, I was working out while I was employed.
How did you do that? Like, how did you manage that? Because some people would hear that and go, like, I'm so busy and tired from my job that there's no way I could do that. So what did that look like for you? Were you working evenings, weekends?
All of the above, yes, for sure. So I had a really busy job. Working at Facebook is not a light job. It definitely is fuller than full time, like most jobs today. I was traveling a lot, but I also was able to, take advantage of nights, weekends. I would get up really early. I just sort of figured out how to make time. Also, keep in mind, I was not taking on a full client workload that you would if you were full time. So I was doing a manageable amount. I maybe had one client at a time, then a few months would go by and I have another. So I probably had maybe 5 over the course to 7 over the course of a year. And they were not all like, I wasn't coming in every day to those companies or even at all. I would do one meeting in the morning early and then do strategy work at night. So it was manageable. And honestly, had it not been, I couldn't have kept it up. So it really was what was the kind of moment that I left. It was really like a growing realization that I could do this over the course of the year. And then it was actually I think it was my first or second client that Facebook said, no, you know what, we think this is too much of a conflict with our own business. So we're not going to give it our blessing. And I was like, okay. And I realized like, okay, this is my moment. I think either I can say, sure, no problem, I won't work with you. Or you know what, this is a good opportunity to think about, is this the time to leave?
And so when that happened, when you made that decision, okay, I'm going to now no longer work at Facebook, I'm going to kind of go all into consulting. You've already had 5 to 7 or so clients that you've been working with. So you've built up some experience. You have an understanding around your offerings, your messaging, who you want to be working with, the price points. What did you do to then go out and get more clients, enough to make it a full-time thing, to really create an income, essentially replace your income and go beyond that?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely didn't happen all at once. I left with two clients that were my sort of at that time. So those were going to last me, a few months. And I felt like, okay, but it wasn't a perfect situation. I think in my head, I was like, I will have 5 clients when I leave. And it wasn't perfect, right? And I think it was somebody who told me, it's never going to be perfect. At a certain point, you just need to kind of make the leap. And I was like, yeah, okay, this feels good. 2 feels good. So how did I get more? It is a combination of doing many things that I am still in constant process of tweaking. And so I will tell you that I will walk you through kind of what those things are, but I don't think I knew all of these things like coming out day one. So one is definitely looking very closely at the network that I have and that I've built over many years, whether it's like from journalism, publishing, or the platform context I created for myself working with a ton of influencers and publishers. And I went out to some of those key relationships and those key people that I had worked with who knew me. Some of them came to me after I left Facebook and sent my, goodbye email and wanted to have coffee, wanted to discuss. I picked up a couple of clients that way. And so I would say like, first and foremost, I think of my network and the relationships in it as probably the reason I'm doing what I'm doing today. And I treat nurturing that network like a job. So I truly treat it like a job. I'm really big on the follow-up. I consider a lot of those people friends. Like I nurture friendships with some of them. The ones that aren't friends, I just try to be as available, and sort of in their face as possible in a non-annoying way. And I do that by writing. So I write a newsletter as often as I can. I've now started more consistently writing externally for press outlets to try to kind of put myself top of mind, because the worst thing is to have to sell yourself.
So Sara, actually, I want to just dive deeper into one thing that you said there about relationships, because your background is essentially like relationships and partnerships. You clearly know what you're doing there. Now, as you launch your business, you leverage that even more to go out and get more clients. But I want to get really like tactical here. Like, how are you doing that? So a lot of people say, yeah, I know I need to do follow up. What does that look like for you? Are you using a CRM to do that?
No. So I should be. I should have a more strategic way to do this, but I will tell you there's a few different things I do.
Yeah, walk us through like what you do and how you kind of manage it.
For sure. So I spoke about writing and it seems to not connect, but it actually does because that actually nurtures a lot of relationships. So number one, I write as often as I can. That gets my name out there. It helps to show people that this is how I think.
Yeah, and where does the writing go? So I know we'll talk about a little bit later about some of the external outlets, but you're putting this mainly to your blog or to LinkedIn or?
So when I started, it was actually a newsletter. I thought about what is the thing that's going to bring the most value to the people that I want to reach, CMOs and founders and people in marketing. And I looked at a lot of marketing newsletters and I thought, okay, it's got to be really pretty concise. It's got to deliver value. So I came up with something called the short of it, which is essentially my take on one digital content trend or moment that's popping right now and sort of what it is, why you should care, and how to leverage it for your own business.
And how often is that being published?
So when I started, it was great ambitions to do it every other week. Then I realized, you know what, I actually really work hard on these. So it started to be monthly. And now I've switched my strategy entirely where I take a topic, pitch it out, and place a story in an external outlet so that it has that press hit, and then round it up and give it extra value in the newsletter. So this actually happened yesterday where I placed a piece in Harvard Business Review about digital campfires, a term that I came up with for this sort of new moment that I think is happening across the social landscape, which is people sort of younger audiences leaving social or retreating from social media and moving into more small communities. And so I named it, I pitched it, that piece ran, and then I rounded that up in my newsletter, added extra content, and pushed that. And I think that strategy going forward is probably the best. And how that connects to relationships is, I sent that out and many people who I had met over the last 2 years plus got in touch with me to reignite conversations and potentially down the road hire me or not. So it just, that to me, I do think of as essential ingredient. I would say another big thing is I seek out and accept opportunities to speak or do interviews. So I do love working with early stage founders, but typically that's not my bread and butter because they can't really afford me. And so that said, I love hearing what they're up to. I love bringing value to them in other ways. So I host a series at a VC fund here in LA, which is sort of a female founders dinner series where they organize it all and bring in fabulous, top, amazing guests. And so I just get to show up and with a little prep, interview them. And I have that relationship now. So I've met them in a non-business context that, I'm not selling them, but it's a relationship. So a lot of stuff has come out of that. And then I would say I go to key conferences and events, but not all. So I'm very strategic where I know there's going to be high value groups of people. And I hate, what does that term mean? It's a little vague, but you can kind of tell by the organizers and who's doing it. I don't think it makes sense for me to run myself ragged going to everything, but I go to them and then I try to make genuine connections and then I follow up. So I'm making the connection with something more than just, here's who I am selling. It's more, you're going to get to know me. Am I bringing value to your life at this very moment? Great. And now we have a relationship. And again, the way I stay in touch with them is through newsletter.
Hey, it's Michael here, and we'll be right back to the podcast. But first, are you ready to grow, scale, and take your consulting business and marketing to the next level? If so, our Clarity Coaching program may be a great fit for you. You'll work with our experienced team to set up a strategic plan for your business and coach you step by step in areas like how to consistently attract more leads, develop a magnetic message that resonates with your ideal clients, strategically package and position your services, earn higher fees, win more proposals, and scale your business. To find out more about Clarity Coaching and apply, go to consultingsuccess.com and click on coaching.
And so when you say that, in terms of the follow-up, is the majority of your follow-up done through your newsletter, or are you doing a lot of one-to-one emails, text messages?
Oh, a lot of email. So if I meet you, we've had a conversation, I'll always follow up unless something has gone terribly awry and I've completely been too busy. But usually I make a point to follow up with an email. And then I'll often, honestly, at holiday time, send a card. I think something that's personal to them and just sort of keep them in mind if they've helped me or if I've been in the mix with them. That can be very helpful.
How do you follow up? Because you said you're not using a CRM. So how do you remember who to follow up with? While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
I come home for a conference and I have business cards and I place them on my table and I look at them and email those people, and then I put them into a Google Doc, like Rolodex, basically. And that's how I keep my Rolodex. Right now, that's not very efficient. I want to change to something that's better, but I just haven't prioritized it. I have so much other stuff going on.
Got it. Have you heard of a tool called Boomerang by any chance?
I use Boomerang all the time, and I consider it to be like my little remote assistant. Honestly, it's hilarious. It's actually very funny because I use it to boomerang my husband sometimes, and he's like, "Weren't you in like a gym class?" What? I was like, I boomeranged it. So I use it for many purposes that cross over both work and life.
Yeah, for anyone that's wondering, like, what are these guys talking about? Boomerang. It's a little extension for Gmail or even Outlook that allows you to schedule when you want to send messages into the future. But another feature of it that I really like is that if you send an email to someone and you don't get a response within the defined period that you want, so let's say 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, whatever, it'll remind you, it'll come back and say, hey, you need to follow up with that person. So great little tool. That's not a full-on CRM by any means, but as a way to ensure that you don't let things fall through the cracks. Yeah, great tool.
It's great. Yeah, it's been a game changer. The other one I would say, and I actually don't use it, but I've heard it recommended many times, is MailTrack, which is just an opportunity for are people opening your emails? Are they forwarding them? I haven't done it yet because for a variety of reasons, but I've heard, like Boomerang, it can be game changing.
Yeah. Let's talk about and kind of dive into what you're doing with your content, specifically around the external publications. You mentioned you just got a piece put into HBR, Harvard Business Review. I believe the title is The Era of Anti-Social Social Media, which I love because people who really know me know I am on social media, but it's not where I spend a ton of time. I just prefer to interact through in-person meals or meeting people, or just more higher touch point and not just on the social channels, but there's a lot of value in there. And I know that many people use it a lot better than I do. Regardless, that's a very well-known brand, one that can add a lot of cachet. It's something that you can, leverage for future publications. Some people even go as far as saying it's very hard to get into HBR. And once you do, there's not many publications that you can't get into. You've done that. So spill the beans. How did you make that happen? And I think the bigger thing is not so much just about HBR itself, but the principles, the ideas that you use that you felt were really critical in getting you in there that people can then apply to other publications that they would want to get into as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I have a background as an editor. So I kind of have a sensibility of how to pitch a piece and how to frame a piece that an editor would care about. That said, I've pitched many pieces that have not been placed or found a home. The genesis of this piece was from the newsletter. I was writing it as a newsletter. I came up with the term digital campfires, and I happened to be doing a work day with a founder friend of mine. And I mentioned it to him and he goes, "You should pitch that. Don't put it in your newsletter. Pitch it." And I was like, "Oh, that's so much work. Oh my God." I'm already done. I'm ready to send this thing. I was like, "But you're right." So that was in August. I spent probably a month trying to track down and find the name of an editor. And I'm part of a group, a listserv group called It's actually called Women in Tech, or The List. And it's Rachel Sklar's brainchild. I've known her for years. She's actually from Toronto as well. But it consists of a lot of different women, and usually sort of mostly tech, media, and marketing worlds. And so I made an ask to The List. Does anyone know anybody at HBR? I have a pitch. Does anyone want to share an email? And I was able to procure that. So from there, I got an intro to the editor. But of course, the pitch was the thing that might have got me in the door, but the pitch was the thing that sort of got me past just like a thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. So break it down for us, because someone may not have that email for the right person, or they might be going, well, okay, that's why this worked for you, Sarah, because you had it in, but there's obviously a lot more to it. If you didn't have a good pitch, they wouldn't have accepted it. So when you say your background is in journalism and editing, so what does a good pitch look like for people?
Yeah, I think, okay, so a good pitch has a very strong point of view. By the way, I think it varies for publication to publication. So I think you really have to know what the audience is for the specific publication. Obviously, I do read Harvard Business Review, but I read a bunch of different articles to kind of like get a sense of, all right, how do I frame this so it makes sense? But I knew that my piece was really for a business audience, whereas there are other pieces I've written that are more for a consumer, sort of typical consumer facing audience. This was not that. This was specific actionable takeaways for marketers, kind of like what is the trend, and then specific takeaways. So knowing that that's the framing. So I was very clear. First, I up top identified very clearly what this was about. And then I also made it extremely research heavy. So I did a paragraph of, here's what we're seeing in the landscape today, which is that Gen Z and millennials are, let's say, thawing a little bit on their excitement around social. It's not like there's not a flood or an exodus, but this is a small thing that we're seeing. And okay, this is an interesting trend. So really, really linking to that hard data that I'd found, and then going, where are they going instead? Well, I think they're going to digital campfires, which was an original concept. So having an original concept, and then identifying clearly what those campfires are. So for me, I was able to break them down into 3 different types that I then put one line explaining each. And then at the end of the pitch, I just said, in this, I will talk through actionable takeaways for marketers on how to navigate each of these campfires with a ton of specific examples. So it was a combination of like establishing the trend using data and insights, showing my original approach and how I would tackle it, and then explaining how I would make this relevant to marketers.
And how much of that did you communicate in your initial outreach to the editor? Like, do you send the article or?
No. I sent a pitch. So the pitch had all of those elements. It was probably 200 words, maybe, explaining what this was in my approach with like bullets of what I would tackle. I think it depends on the publication. So I recently wrote a piece for Ad Age, and I actually sent the entire piece. A lot of publications won't even consider that. So I'm always a big fan of doing the pitch first so you don't have to. But in the case of Ad Age, I kind of knew that I would run that on my newsletter or something anyway if they didn't accept it. So I didn't mind.
Got it. And in your experience, how common is it to need to do a lot of follow-up, like after you do the pitch?
So common. Yes, you could have some major self-esteem issues if you didn't assume that, you'd have to do a lot of follow-up. It comes with the territory. I've had to follow up 2 or 3 times in some cases with editors who have then gotten back to me. So I do think that persistence pays off. You don't want to just shoot emails at them every other day, but you do want to follow up. And that's where Boomerang can actually be very helpful, because there's a feature where you click follow up and you write the email and it says if they have not replied. And so if they do reply, the email will not go out. So I do think that persistence is key. I don't think that pitching is for the faint of heart, because it makes you feel like crap if they don't get back to you with all your hard work. But at the same time, it is worth it. At least it has been for me. Yeah,
I think maybe the other thing just to remind people is that even if your idea is not accepted by one publication, doesn't mean that a different publication won't accept it. And worst case scenario, there's still many ways to leverage that content, right? Your own website, LinkedIn, like lots of things that you can still do with it. So it's not a failure just because your target or ideal publication says no to you.
No, absolutely. I pitched campfires to, I think, 10 maybe 7 different publications, and it wasn't right for them. And that's okay. It was, so I absolutely think, yeah.
What is the impact? So like, it sounds like a lot of your business and opportunities is coming from the relationships that you've established, all right, the follow-up, the newsletter, but what's the impact that you are seeing from actually having your content in these external publications? Like you put this, I know the most recent article has only been on HBR now for a day or so.
24 hours.
Yeah, right. A little too hard to tell. Although I think these days some people might try and judge their success or failure, in that short of a time span, which is a big mistake. But what have you seen overall? Like how much has publishing in other publications supported and helped your business?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 ways that I sort of in my head measure it, because I do think it's a little hard to measure like concretely. The first is kind of obvious, direct correlation between me placing something and somebody coming to me. So I, after the Ad Age piece, had like a bunch of that. And I had people wanting to take calls with me. And I've done a couple proposals out of that. Has anything come of it? I don't know. That was in December. I also had a piece like that in Quartzy. Quartzy is like Quartz's sort of sister publication about lifestyle, and it was about the wellness industry. Believe I had a piece of business come out of that. So that's sort of the like direct, and that doesn't seem like a lot, like, oh, okay, 1 or 2. However, what I do think it's even more valuable for is legitimizing me to somebody's boss or to themselves. So I'm a CMO or I'm a founder and I come across Sara, or maybe she's introduced to me through a friend of a friend of a friend, or I see her on LinkedIn. Oh, she's written for these publications. Here's how she thinks. This is her approach. It legitimizes me to them in a way that no introduction ever could, and that I never could, that I never want to be walking into a meeting without that legitimization. So I think that actually is where it's more valuable. And it's a sort of a third way is when I walk into a meeting, they've already read a lot of that stuff. And so they understand how I think. And so it actually makes my job a lot easier because I don't have to explain as much. They kind of get it already. And it helps me understand if they're a fit for me as well. But honestly, it's very hard to measure. All of this could be very fuzzy and, why are you going to spend so much time doing this? But I know that it does drive my own business because I've seen it and because people constantly email me and talk about it and ask me questions about it and pass it on.
Yeah, Elliot Began, who's a peer coach in our coaching program here, describes this as conformational marketing. And I've always loved that term because much of like many consultants' websites, they don't necessarily generate a ton of business directly through the website, but the website, if done properly, still helps you to win business because the first thing when someone does when they want to engage you or before they do is, of course, they're going to go to your website, they're going to go to your LinkedIn profile. And so all these materials, the messaging that you have on these things, the case studies, the results, all of that is conformational. And I think that's exactly what you're saying as well, Sara.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I want to thank you again for coming on, sharing a bit of your journey and lessons learned along the way here. I also want to make sure that people can learn more about you and maybe firsthand see an example of your newsletter so that they could think about how to deconstruct that and maybe apply some of those best practices to their own business. So where's the best place for people to go?
Yeah, definitely. So you can go to my website, swprojects.co. That's swprojects with an s.co. You can also find me on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Sara Wilson, no H. I'm also on Instagram as that as well, all one word. I'm the verified account, Sara Wilson, so you should see me. That's probably the best place. And you can sign up for my newsletter at the very bottom of my website.
Wonderful. Well, again, Sara, thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.